So in terms of belief, I don't know. I think maybe in terms of practice, I'm projecting here, but if I was a priest or a minister or a pastor or such like, I think I would probably be leaning on AI to help me put together more inspirational and varied sermons for my flock. I think in terms of anybody who is communicating to a group of people, be that a comedian or a television presenter or a teacher or a pastor, I think those things can certainly help. And I would imagine it would be pretty good to be able to sort of lean on an AI system to delve out some more obscure Bible or scripture references in order to wow your audience more. Perhaps even as well, you could use AI to sort of have compelling arguments for the existence of God. I would counter that with using AI to dispel some of those ideas, mind you. So like for that kind of level, yes. In terms of like the public and their consumption of should we say religious doctrine, maybe I don't know. It depends how much people go looking for it. I guess if I was part of some large religious organization, the use of AI to target people for should we say advertising would be very useful. If I was unscrupulous, for example, maybe I would specifically target people who had just undergone a bereavement with adverts about the afterlife. I think that may be a good way of bringing new people into the flock. That's potentially useful.
From an Islamic perspective, I think it can be very helpful in terms of research. So you might see behind me, there's all these amazing volumes which contain literally more than 1,000 years of scholarship, and they're not easily accessible. It's a specialist, like in any field, it's a specialist endeavor. But what the AI could do is to kind of make accessible a lot of that scholarship. So, for example, you could be researching a verse of the Quran, and you could, in seconds, you could bring up all the different opinions and the interpretations and that many scholars have done over the centuries, and kind of summarize that and make it accessible.
There have been experiments with churches using AIs and robots to lead church services with mixed results. It very much depends on how people view these things. The issue, I don't think you could have proper AI ministers. You could have them carrying out the function, but they don't really have the capacity because they're not in the image of God. Now, when one talks about the image of God, there are certain issues that arise. On the one hand, we very regularly transmit and create the image of God by natural means. And there is a question of whether you can, by artificial means, do the same thing. There are people who consider that because man, as Homo faber, can create things, and one of the things they could create by being the image of God, at least some kind of partial image that could be transmitted to our artifacts, AI-type artifacts. Now that's an interesting perspective, and it's one that needs to be analysed critically. It's only just starting to be put forward, and it's certainly something that can be used. It can be used in a particularly more narrow way by enabling people to have some kind of pastoral care, whereby they can be pointed to particular texts, can be pointed to solutions to and listened to in terms of their problems. That's a kind of pastoral religious version of what is taking place within the sort of medical psychological domain for monitoring and looking after people who are vulnerable. and giving them support so they don't have to get into hospital. So you've got home surveillance systems and care package systems. I mean, they're still in an early stage of development, but there is certainly some potential for that. And pointing people to good books or places in scripture where they might find help could be a useful use of AI in that regard.
That's an amazing question, actually, and people listening to it thinking, what a bizarre question. Actually, it's taken very seriously. So there's a very famous technologist called Ray Kurzweil, who's been around the field of AI for decades. And, Ray loves to say, big controversial things. Some might say just sell books, but he's also a very thoughtful thinker. And he has floated the idea a few years ago that if AI continues to develop, we may actually end up building God. He's an atheist, but he thinks ironically with AI, we may actually be creating the God of the future. Now, I think that's wrong-headed for all kinds of reasons, but it shows the question is not a new one. It's been kicking around for the last 20 years or so. But in terms of that particular example of, somebody sort of interacting with an AI, sort of role-playing Jesus, I would have a few concerns. In the same way I would if somebody walked into a church and there was they had a conversation with somebody behind a curtain who was pretending to be Jesus. Because again, you're not engaging with reality. And I think when we're engaging with religion or philosophy or science or anything, as a philosopher, what matters to me is what's really, really real. And one of the concerns with AI is it can imitate really, really well. And the problem is, as human beings, we get deceived very easily. The imitation is so good that we end up thinking it's real. And that, by the way, again, is not a new idea. That goes right back to the father of AI, Alan Turing, who in the 1950s came up with what's come to be called the Turing test, which is the idea that a computer system is genuinely intelligent if it can imitate a human being, and someone talking to it doesn't know they're dealing with a robot, with a computer, not with the real thing. But I think he was quite reticent about that. I'm not sure Alan was advancing that as a good thing so much as a thought experiment. So in that light, I get concerned when humans are dealing with imitations rather than reality. And again, I come back to, I think the best use of AI is when you know what you're dealing with. You're not having the AI to pretend to be something it's not. You're engaging with the AI as an AI to help you in what you're doing. And of course, as a Christian, I believe that you don't need to engage with a simulacrum of Jesus. You can engage with the real thing, because I believe in a God who is living and active and who he communicates with us through his spirit.
Somebody wanted to speak to an AI God. AI Yahweh. Yahweh AI. You can trademark that if you want. Well, look, if I speak to somebody who expressed a desire to speak to an AI God, I think I'd be wondering why. And, bear in mind, people have moments of silent prayer on their own where they are essentially talking to God. They don't get an answer in that respect. So I suppose it's like it might be like saying a prayer with getting a little bit of a callback. So I think my advice to them would be very, very, be very careful about what you believe in terms of what you get back. Again, we touched on AI ethics earlier on. So let's imagine, you have an AI sort of trained up to act as a pastor or whatever, right? Let's imagine it's a Christian pastor, right? If somebody accidentally presses the Old Testament button instead of the lovely shiny New Testament button, then suddenly the AI God that they speak to is going to be telling them to, not eat shellfish or wear mixed fabrics or dabble with people of the same sex as them, right? And I think all of those sound like a lot of fun, and I wouldn't want to stop anybody from doing that. So my advice to anybody wanting to speak to an AI God, I would hope they would take it for what it is. It is a conversation with an AI system, and be very careful about the advice you get.
The short answer to that is don't. As I said earlier, the potential for idolatry is very real within AI, and treating AI as divine would be a step beyond what any human being should do. It reminds me of the situation depicted by Isaiah, from Isaiah 40 onwards, and there are various descriptions of it's speaking ironically of the way people treat the objects that they have, their tools. So chop down a tree and use half of the tree to as fuel for the fire, to warm yourself and to cook your food, which is a very useful practice, and how you would use the artifacts that you have. That's the useful, that's the good side of it. But then the other half of the tree carved into an image that you fall down and worship, which has got no capacity to help you in that actual regard. The issue here is that you are increasing the appearance with AI, because you can get very real interactions, and people are susceptible to these interactions, I think, as I said earlier. And so the spiritual aspect of seeking to interact with a divinity in that way would simply be another form of idolatry that would detract or mislead people, or point them away from the true God.
I would say speak to God himself. And God that's the thing, God is limitless, and however great AI is and whatever, it's still the input it's still human input, so it's still limited by by those limits. God is limitless, God is transcendent. We should be interacting with God directly. Nothing holds us back from that direct, interaction with God and speaking to God and feeling God's presence. No technology can ever replace that. And even prophets and human beings, we believe Jesus is a prophet. We believe the Prophet Muhammad is a prophet, and these are human beings, but they're divinely inspired. So there's again, no technology can sort of stand in the place of the things, the revelation and inspiration that they receive from God.